Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of the UK. Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Hi there. Hi, Gordon. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you so much.
Great. We're very, very glad to join you. Sorry I can't be with you in person. I'm sure Copenhagen this time of year is absolutely wonderful.
It is wonderful. It is sunny, and you're missing it, but we're still equally happy that
I remember going there that wonderful June of 1992 when the Danes heroically voted against the Maastricht Treaty. Do you remember that fantastic day?
So I as a German, remember 1992 when the Danes won the Euro Championship in Germany. But
that's right, and Uffe Ellemann-Jensen said, "If you can't join them, beat them." That was his.
Or just lose the way we did it, right? So, Mr. Johnson, we have a simple one. We have an easy topic: navigating a new world order. Let's start with maybe the most important factor, with Donald Trump. You know him quite well, maybe even. You were at the inauguration.
Yes.
Do we miss a thing about him?
Do you mean, do Europeans fail to grasp something about him? No, I think what you see is pretty much what you get, and I think that look, when it comes to Ukraine, which is for me the transcendent issue of our times, the thing we really have to get right. I look back at the history of the last few years before Trump came in, and with all the complaints we may have now about his position, and I just observed two things. So, first of all, under Joe and for the previous 3 years, whatever you say about what the West was doing, we were just about stopping the Ukrainians from losing, but we never had the balls to give them what they needed actually to win, and we must be honest about that. And the second thing I always noticed was that actually it was Trump back in 2018, I think it was, who gave them the Javelin shoulder-launched missiles. And Trump broke the taboo on giving Ukrainians lethal weaponry, right? Which the Democrats had not done. So I've always thought that if we can get peace through strength in Ukraine, there is a chance that Trump, for all the criticisms people make of him, that Trump can actually deliver it. And I think where we are now, Gordon, is at a very crucial moment, because what's happening is very obvious to I mean, all our audience, I'm sure, can see it. The Ukrainians have been pushed into a corner. They've been made to accept all sorts of concessions that they're not going to get back all their country in the medium to short term. That their NATO membership is off the table, at least for the time being. They've had to accept the minerals deal. Actually, I think it's a good deal for both sides, but clearly there have been difficult things in it for Ukraine, and so on. And they've had to accept an awful lot. The Russians have been placed under no real pressure so far, and everybody can see that. And I think what's happening now in Washington, I hope, is that people are finally recognizing that Putin doesn't want a deal. And I think that slowly...
Are you confident this is happening?
I wish I could say I was confident about that. I think people are recognizing... I think people are recognizing that Putin doesn't want a deal, but it is not clear to them what the consequences of that recognition are. And I worry that this week, in Istanbul, where we're getting to, is a very dangerous conclusion, which is that there is a deal to be done, but it would be on Putin's terms. And what I worry about is that the United States is starting to think, well, I know what. Here's what we do. Putin delivers a ceasefire, and in return, we just agree that we'll stop supplying Ukraine with weapons, and Ukraine won't join NATO. And why should they be a highly militarized state backed by Western forces? We could agree that. And I think what I worry about is that people say, "We'll stop the death. We'll stop the death. We'll stop the killing." And the president will be able to tell himself that is a success, when of course it will be an utter disaster, because Putin would remain in a position to destabilize Ukraine and, of course, to launch a third invasion. And
now I'm wondering. So
I'm actually very anxious now about the situation. And
because you were confident, you said he was strong and decisive. That was your words. That were your words before President Trump started his second term. I wonder if this is strong and decisive, what we see, or if it's just a president who is, listening most to the person he's just talking to in that very moment, and then the next day he's forgetting part of the things.
I think there's a lot of I think that, like many leaders, President Trump listens to lots of different voices before making up his mind. But what I hope is that he will see that the option I've just sketched out is simply not one that he can take, and that it does mean a success for Putin, an effective victory for Putin, because he would then be able to determine the future of Ukraine. So what I hope is that the process of disillusionment is going to continue in Washington, and that they recognize that the only way forward, and I think a lot of them increasingly do recognize this, the only way forward is to keep going with the steel-quilled porcupine strategy, fortify Ukraine so that it's invulnerable, completely militarily unappetizing to any future attack, and help Ukraine steer a path which is where I think they want to go, towards integration with us, with the West. And look, I'm anxious, but I don't think that Donald Trump's instincts will be to let Ukraine be crushed. And I don't think that his political, I don't think he has the political space to allow it to happen. You see what I mean? I don't think it's possible for him to record in his presidency a defeat in a battle for democracy and freedom of that kind. If Putin ends up in a situation in which he can basically call the shots in Ukraine, stop an independent Ukraine being able to defend itself, being able to invite onto its own sovereign territory whatever allies it wants, stop allies from fortifying Ukraine with long-term military support, I don't think Trump will be able to live with that. I mean, that is not the minerals deal, right? The minerals deal says that the United States wants a free, sovereign, and secure Ukraine. That's in the second recital of the deal. So we just got to keep focused on that.
You were mentioning the porcupine strategy, and I hope you can hear us because the picture is frozen now, but I assume you hear us.
Yes.
Wonderful. You were mentioning the porcupine strategy. The porcupine strategy does not include a membership at NATO, for instance. Do you think Ukraine should rather slowly give up hope on that topic?
Well, I'm proud to say I was the father of the porcupine strategy, instead of being the mother of the porcupine in a few years ago. Because if you remember, 3 years ago, immediate NATO membership of Ukraine was thought to be impossible. We weren't talking about it as much then, and I think it's a shame that it's got even worse now. The porcupine strategy is really meant to be a substitute for NATO membership, and it's meant to be the next best thing. If you can't get an Article 5 guarantee, then you give the Ukrainians the wherewithal to defend themselves. And after all, the best security guarantee for the Ukrainians are the Ukrainians themselves. They're the best fighters in Europe now, right? What we need, and I don't think any war fighting commitment by any of us, whether Brits or French or Danes or whatever, is going to be as credible as Ukraine's own self-defenses. What we need to do is fund it. We need a 10-year plan for the funding of Ukraine's military needs.
We do see,
And you can have boots on the ground as well for reassurance, but the most important thing is the kit.
we do see a lot of cooperation between the European countries, and I'm not talking about EU countries. I'm including the UK. Quite close cooperation on Ukraine. Now you delivered Brexit. What kind of feeling does that give to you when, like, the UK and Europe sort of kind of work really closely together in that topic? Is that good or?
Yes, and we did from the beginning. And if you remember, Gordon, actually what happened, you will recall that when we were in the EU, under the wonderful common foreign and security policy, overseen by the great and glorious Federica Mogherini and assorted other characters in plenipotentiaries of the EU. The thing was run, the Ukraine dossier, you will remember, was owned by France and Germany. And there was this thing called the Normandy process. Remember the processus de Normandie, which was basically a most ghastly rigmarole.
You felt excluded.
Which excluded everybody except France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine. France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine. So what happened was France and Germany would sit around the table with Russia and Ukraine and treat them as though they were a couple in Stevenage who were undergoing a domestic brawl, and that it was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, as my mother used to say, and they needed to sort it out between them. But it wasn't like that. It was a brutal act of aggression by Russia upon Ukraine. It was an invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And the Normandy process was utterly hopeless in its moral equivalence, and it was wrong. And I think that it was important, actually, that the UK was outside the EU when that thing happened in February 2022, because we were able to take a very, very different position. And we said, to hell with this Minsk nonsense in the Normandy process. This is violence by Russia against a free, independent, sovereign European country. And we, the UK, are going to do everything we can to rally all our European friends and partners and the United States to try to help Ukrainians to resist that aggression. So actually, I think being outside the etiquette and protocols of the European Common Foreign and Security Policy was quite helpful when it came to Ukraine, because we no longer had to obey all that politesse, and we did, I think, what was necessary. And we were the first European country to give the Ukrainians the serious lethal weaponry, and we went on and did a lot more. So I don't think it was any disadvantage. Put it this way: I certainly don't think it was any disadvantage at that period being outside the EU. And now, and by the way, I throughout the negotiations for Brexit, I always said to Ursula and to von der Leyen and to others, look, the UK is always going to be supportive of European defence and security. You can't tow us out into the middle of the Atlantic. We're here. We're a European power. We're always going to be with you. And I think everybody always understood that. So I think this is a bit of it's a red herring. It's a red herring. We're with you in NATO. We're with you in every conceivable important respect, and we always will.
I could continue forever on this topic, but I think as we are limited in time, I would like to shift the focus a little bit towards Asia. And the question, do we forget or neglect the tensions in Asia because we are so absorbed by the Ukraine conflict, or is it the correct thing for us in Europe to focus on sort of our own conflict, or would you make the case and say we need to show more presence?
No, Gordon. Look, I think if you're talking about India and Pakistan, was that what you were driving at? Yeah. I think it's absolutely vital that we do everything we can, whether it's Europe or as the US or the UK, to persuade our friends, and they're both our friends, to dial it down. I think, look, to be absolutely frank with you, from a UK perspective, we have to be honest with ourselves about the role that the UK specifically can play in trying to calm tensions in that particular area, because of course I think it'd be probably fair to say that both sides in India and Pakistan associate the origins of the problem with us. It is the issue is one of the legacies of empire, and I think that for the UK to be seen to be wagging its finger too much at either party or any of the parties, either party is we have to be extremely careful in the way we approach it. I think actually what Donald Trump has tried to do has been useful. Clearly, the whole world wants this thing to calm down. I think that European powers, the United States, we all have an interest in dialing down these tensions, and we should all get involved. I've seen, but l'un n'empêche pas l'autre, as they say in Brussels. Caring about Ukraine doesn't mean we shouldn't care about tensions in Kashmir or whatever.
And if we go even further in Asia and we look at at China and also the tensions that arise around China, do you think Europe should play a role in that, should be present, or is that maybe the wrong approach?
No, I think that's totally the right thing to do. And I think that we need to be. I think there was a US Undersecretary of State or somebody who said something the other day saying, oh, well, leave the Asia Pacific region to us, you deal with Europe. I don't think that's the right way to think about it at all. I think that we're all in this together. I think that this is what we need to think about is the way that democracies are going to work together and the way that free market, freedom-loving democracies are going to collaborate. And I think that we have a role in the Pacific as much as we have anywhere else. And look, you'll remember that one of the things we did post Brexit was to set up the AUKUS with the United States and with Australia. And that is an extremely good idea. It's not just sharing of submarine technology, it's a lot of other military technologies as well. And the democracies on the Pacific Rim, Australia, Korea, Japan, India, they all want to get involved, and we should certainly be engaged in that as well. One thing, Gordon, here's one thing I think your Security Conference should think about, the Democracy Summit in Copenhagen. This tariff war, right, which I think is wrong. How is it going to end? I think the EU should be making a big offer to Trump, and the EU and the UK together should be making a big offer to Trump. And that is to go, and I think Elon Musk said something of the same kind. We should go for a zero tariff free trade zone between Europe and the US. And moreover, we should get rid of all these demented European standards and protectionist barriers to trade, just as the Americans should get rid of theirs. It is absurd that Parma ham and Parmesan cheese should be only made in Parma. You might as well say the hamburgers should only be made in Hamburg. It's absolute nonsense. And we should have nothing against American chlorinated chicken, which is perfectly delicious. I just spent 3 weeks in Texas eating nothing but chlorinated chicken. Made me the man I am. That's fantastic. And hamburgers, hormone-treated hamburgers. Nothing wrong with it at all. End this protectionist nonsense. And you're talking about the Far East, talking about the rise of China. What Trump is trying to do is find a way of standing up to China. How much more powerful and successful we would be if we did it together. Think of it. The EU and the United States. In the words of Edward Gibbon, the fairest part of the earth and the most civilized portion of mankind, if I can get away with that, which I probably can't, all the most affluent consumers on the planet in a position of fantastic power to negotiate with the rising Chinese. We should do it together. The democracies need to stand together in the Euro-Atlantic area and in the Pacific, and that's what that's the vision I commend to your summit.
Wonderful. And I think this is something that many of us here in the room share. We have reached the end of our geopolitical debate, but I can't leave you, even virtually, without asking you a very final question. Because when you were being asked about your chances of being prime minister again, you said, quote, "The chances are about as good as being blinded by a champagne cork or decapitated by a frisbee."
Yes.
Which
Or
is
locked
not,
in a disused fridge.
which is
Or,
not
or
zero.
reincarnated as an olive.
Which is not
Yes.
zero. So your chances are
But
not
yes,
zero.
yes, that's true. I did, look. I think I have to be realistic about this. I'm having a wonderful time trying to pay for my wife's kitchen, which, as anybody in the audience will know, is a very big undertaking, and I've got my hands full with that. I'm writing various books, and um, I'm very honoured to be at your democracy summit, but or to be contributing to it, but um, the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen, Her late Majesty the Queen, once said to me, "You should only really do politics. You've got to try to be useful," and I think she was right. I think if I could see a way I could be useful, I would do it. But right now, I think I'm better employed campaigning for Ukraine, which is what I do a lot of, writing and speaking. That's what I do.